Again, there's no standard defined or classifications for tokens, so I've broken down the existing token marketplace into two main categories: tokens that are linked to the card number and those that are card replacement values with no relationship to the card number. In general, the tokens related to the card number are either specific to a card number or specific to a transaction, depending on the implementation. Card number replacement values are typically more related to a specific transaction. This is an important distinction, and it will influence how you adopt and integrate a tokenization solution. We'll look at each type in greater detail. One important note first, though: some of the tokens tend to be more likely to be used in-house. Others tend to be outsourced. It's important to recognize that the in-house tokenization solutions also keep the card numbers in-house, and that means you have to be responsible for the risk and the cost and the complexity and the compliance to protect it too. By outsourcing the tokenization function, you can reduce your PCI compliance requirements and costs. Here's an example of one of the definitions of token. It also applies to a relatively new type of tokenization that Dave mentioned called format preserving encryption. These could be an in-house solution or in-house, but as we'll see shortly, to be completely effective, they need to be outsourced to a processor with front-end and back-end capabilities. In any event, with these tokens, the big claim is that the solution can be more easily integrated because the token looks like a card number, but this comes at the expense of security. The internal token digits can be generated any number of ways, from sequential numbers to random numbers to using encryption algorithms, but the vulnerabilities are still the same. I wrote a quick little program to generate all possible card numbers given the first 6 and last 4 digits, which also passed the Lund check-digit algorithm. On my laptop, in less than 1.5 seconds, I can generate a file with all 100,000 valid combinations. In there is my actual credit card number along with a bunch of other numbers that may be legitimate from my issuer. And of course, if I'm a hacker, I don't really care if I got the targeted card number or not, as long as it works. So you may think, who's going to put all that time and effort into breaking a card number? This is just a trivial mathematical exercise. The scary answer is that hackers do have the time to spend on this. They were inside Hannaford's network for months before they were detected. They were in Heartland's network for 6 months before they got to the card numbers. Hackers have the time, and the card numbers are the motivation. And one other point to make on this is that another issue with this approach is the possibility of collisions. Collisions are basically where you get the same value for different transactions. Encryption solutions are almost always performed in-house, and there are lots of standard encryption methods available. They usually demand new secure hardware devices, HSMs, or host security modules, and these are where your encryption keys are stored, as well as where the encryption and decryption processes take place. Encrypted values are great for protecting the card number during transmission and storage, but they're unwieldy to work with operationally. And because they're linked to the card number is still potentially at risk. As long as you have the card number, it's at risk. These values may take a little more time and effort to integrate, especially with older merchants with older technologies. Treating the cryptograms as a harmless token is a mistake, however. If the encryption keys were ever divulged, all the card numbers encrypted under them would be at risk. Now, the extraordinary processes and procedures of key management make all that very unlikely. So you're safe if you use encryption and you're breached, right? No. Some hacking techniques revealed earlier this year show that hackers are now using your own HSMs to decrypt the encrypted card numbers while they're in your network, and all without ever knowing the key. Hackers certainly keep it interesting. And of course, by keeping encryption in-house, you also have to worry about the handoff points where the data is in the clear. You also have to keep all the upfront and ongoing hardware personnel costs in-house, and you have to comply with Section 3 of the PCI DSS, which is one of the more onerous. One-way hashes are another in-house solution that replaces the card number with another value. Whereas encryption provides a value that can be later decrypted, hashing provides a value that cannot easily or directly be converted back to the card number. You can't unstir the soup of a hash value. There are some possible threats from hackers with rainbow tables, also known as dictionary attacks, where the attacker generates an exhaustive list of all the possible hash values along with the original value. Fortunately, it would take a long time to generate the 1 quadrillion possible combinations of every 16-digit card number in order to be able to reverse engineer those hashes, and then it would be one by one. And it's relatively easy behind the scenes to thwart the effectiveness of such an attack. Compliance-wise, PCI only requires that it's a hash method based on strong cryptography, which basically means it's a known and secure algorithm, and there are lots of free software libraries readily available. So this may make hashes sound a little better than encryption, except for one thing. You'll more than likely have to also still store the actual card numbers for the hash to be of any real use. Hash values can be used for logging or to run analysis on, for instance, fraud scrubbing, purchase trending, but there's not much functionality beyond that. With only the hash value, merchants can't issue refunds or process new transactions without getting the card number from the consumer again. So you'd really need to have the hashing function outsourced to some third party that had the hash and the card number, and then there'd be the possibility of more functionality. But I'm really not aware of anybody that's doing that as an outsourced function. So another definition of tokens is one where there's no relationship to the card number. This value is generated completely independently of the card number. Any such token will only have one meaning or value within the processing system where it was generated. To be most useful, the generation of these values are typically outsourced to the front ends. Otherwise, you have to keep the card number in-house too, and all the risk and cost and complexity and compliance to protect it. These card number replacement values could be anything, but are often sequential values. The easiest and most convenient example is the key index value of a database table. Each time a row is inserted, a unique and new value is generated. Unfortunately, there's several downsides to such an approach. Whatever the device serving the sequential numbers is, it would need to be up 100% of the time. And even though it would have value within the only have value within the particular system that created it, it's also very easy to guess the past and the future values. A rogue employee could easily become a fraudster by slightly manipulating just a few values, or a simple typo could create customer service problems. The last type of tokens not related to card numbers are globally unique identifiers, or GUIDs. These types of tokens are typically outsourced to front ends or gateways, but again, to be completely effective, they too need to be outsourced to a processor with both front end and back end capabilities. GUIDs are not tied to a specific purpose. A GUID can be used to identify people, cars, transactions, anything. Cars have VINs, for instance, and people have Social Security numbers. There might be a lot of John Smiths, but a Social Security number refers to exactly one person. Each system of GUID creation would essentially be its own universe of values. So like the version of tokens that we just looked at, they only have meaning or value within the system where they were generated. These values may take a little more effort to integrate into older merchant systems, the same systems where it would also be even more difficult to add encryption. There are currently no PCI requirements regarding the generation, storage, or use of these tokens. GUIDs can be created through a combination of techniques: random numbers, sequential values, time-based values, hardware-based values. Unlike the previous tokens, however, GUIDs can be generated by any number of devices, so there isn't a single point of failure concern. GUIDs tend to strike a good balance between security and functionality.